Hello, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Abby Zabrodsky, class of 2014, and Simon, class of 2019, where I also earned my MBA. I serve as the co-chair of the Women's Network alongside Kathy Waller and as a member of the Alumni Board and Buffalo Network Leader. To learn more about our Women's Network, please visit the link posted in the chat. Today, we are excited to welcome alumna Aviva Dov Vivan and your professor, Marie-Joelle Estrada, as they lead us in exploring women's narratives through Barbie, Beyonce, and Taylor Swift. Aviva earned a PhD in Visual and Cultural Studies from the University of Rochester in 2010 and a graduate certificate in Gender and Women's Studies from the University of Rochester Susan B. Anthony Institute. She also earned a master's in art history from the University of Virginia. Aviva is a contributing editor at Ms. Magazine, author and editor and screenplay writer. Her academic interests concentrate on gender, race, and representation in popular culture, contemporary visual art and media, including film and television, and the role of the spectator in the digital age. Marie-Joelle Estrada received her PhD in social psychology from Duke University in 2010 and has since been an associate professor of psychology at the University of Rochester. Although her area of specialization is interpersonal relationships, she also specializes in gender, health psychology, and marketing. As a faculty member, she enjoys discussing with her students the many ways in which psychology applies to everyday life. Thank you both for joining us today. We have been looking forward to this conversation for quite some time. Please note that this program will be recorded. We invite you to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen to submit questions to Marie-Joelle and Aviva throughout the program. We will also open the floor formally toward the end of our program for audience questions. Thank you again for joining us. Please enjoy this rich conversation. Okay, let's kick it off. Thank you both again for being here. Our first question really is around how have you seen the depiction of women in pop culture change, and what have you found surprising?
I think it's really wonderful to see women embracing their power and their own narratives. So we've traditionally seen women portrayed through a very masculine lens because we live in a patriarchy, and we've seen that women's roles have been really limited, right? Typically hypersexualized. We've talked about the manic pixie dream girl situation where women just sort of exist as an accessory to the man's story. So we are really seeing women centering themselves at their own narratives and telling it from their perspective. And not only that, getting a lot of cultural support. So Taylor Swift, Beyonce, the Barbie movie, all sorts of other people are endorsing this new, or I shouldn't say new, but this evolved narrative and centering women in their power. So I think it's wonderful. And I sincerely hope we get to see more of it.
Yeah, to piggyback off of that, I think one of the things that I've found really striking in recent years is that, as Marie-Joelle, mentioned, right, as we were sort of coming out of women's representation, say in sort of 50s, 60s, 70s representation, then I find, as a media scholar that, once we get to the 80s and 90s, there's a lot of uncertainty about how exactly women are supposed to be represented. So particularly when we have women in positions of power, which is something particularly in my research I'm interested in. In a lot of 80s, 90s media, there's sort of, does it mean now if women are in positions of power that they have to be sort of masculinized, right, in order to sort of fit into these positions? Or do we hypersexualize them to avoid having them be sort of accused of being overly masculine, right? So all of these sort of debates that you see circulate in both explicit and implicit ways in popular culture, I think. And I really find that, like, as we've gotten into the 2000s and particularly now in the 2020s, that dialogue has really opened up. And I've been really pleased to see that we have a number of really sort of multivalent versions of ways in which women can sort of have power and agency and control in popular culture that is not always about and doesn't have to be about either hyperfemininity or hypermasculinity as sort of ways to sort of embrace these kinds of forms of power, but that we can really see a true diversity, right, of the ways in which women are kind of inhabiting their own agency and their and the ways they sort of interact in the world that are not always bound to gender, right? So sort of gendered notions of what it means to be a woman, but are also just about sort of notions of like humanity and sort of being part of the world. And I found that really striking, really particularly in the last 4 or 5 years.
If I could also add to that, it's really interesting when we think about traditional gender roles and how they're expressed in our society. So specifically that women are taught from a very young age to put other people first. So we talk about this in psychology as communion, right? That you're communally focused, you focus on other people, you focus on other people's stories. And we see that men and women are encouraged to be very different when it comes to their accomplishments. So specifically that women are encouraged to be quiet and subdued because you don't want to make anyone else feel bad, right? Your first thought is about making everyone around you feel fine, even if you've accomplished something. We see the complete opposite with men, where men are encouraged from a very early age to speak very comfortably and convincingly about their successes, even successes they may not actually have, but they just feel very confidently in. So it's also really nice to see these gender roles violated, right? That we're seeing that women no longer feel like they have to shrink themselves or make themselves smaller to care about other people, that women are also feeling very comfortable being their full selves and being proud of who they are, right? Most of the time when we think about pride, that's a bad thing when it comes to women, but in reality, having confidence is actually a really important thing. And if I could also add that in psychology, we do a lot of research on leadership. And since we live in a patriarchy, a system of male-based privilege and power, most of the time with the lean in movement, we've seen things like encouraging women to be more like men. So lean into it, be tough, be as masculine as you want. However, there's actually research in psychology that the style of leadership that is universally preferred and is most effective is actually a feminine one, where you walk the walk and you also look to people that you are supervising and you talk to them, you help inspire them, you care about their individual journeys. And that the traditional sort of, I'm the manager, I'm checking when you come in early, I'm monitoring you, that style of leadership is actually really ineffective. So it's sort of the irony that we have this patriarchy that emphasizes the masculine way is the right way to be, when in reality, all of us should adopt the more feminine style of leadership and realize that that one is actually more successful.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Really insightful. I think everything you've just said, there's a Beyonce song about all of that too, which is great for today. Do you think that pop culture can serve as a platform for feminist activism and create social change?
I mean, I can jump in. I think this is a debate that has been long waged, right? And I feel maybe this is a unfair response, but I feel kind of two ways about it, right? So, like on the one hand, yes, I mean, I think it matters, right? I do think it matters that we have things like Barbie, and that we have Taylor Swift and Beyonce and many other sort of female celebrities, for example, right, who are making very explicit commentaries about their position in regards to feminism and in regards to sort of what they think women and girls should, the sort of kinds of resources they should be able to access and the kinds of sort of agency they should have. I do think those things matter. Of course, certainly I would not want to see the opposite, right? Like I wouldn't want to see celebrities not endorsing feminism or sort of refusing to talk about the sort of rights of women and girls, right? Or this idea of women's rights being human rights, sort of all of these things are important. And something like Barbie, which I know we'll talk more about later too, but something like Barbie I think is important for that reason, because it does provide this popular, very accessible lens, right, on women's agency and on feminism. On the flip side, I think there's been many, this is certainly not just my sort of thoughts, there's been many debates in feminist scholarship over how valuable popular feminism is, right, if it's not actually driving systemic change. And I think that those debates are fair too, right, because it's very easy to like get a Wonder Woman mug, right, and like feel really good about yourself because you have Wonder Woman on your coffee mug. And I'm a full supporter of Wonder Woman coffee mugs, right? So it's fine, but also like that doesn't really change anything, really, right? It has maybe a kind of like emotional value, right? That then you it might make you feel empowered, or other people see the mug and they think, oh, okay, I like this person because they feel the same way I do, right, about this sort of broad issue. But, what kind of actual systemic changes is that making, right, is the question.
Yeah, I also think too that maybe not in the strictest sense of feminism, but even just letting young girls know what is possible. There's a really great documentary that I recommend to everyone, Misrepresentation, and their tagline is, "You can't be what you can't see." And I think that at least in that way, popular culture can show little girls what's possible, right? So that understanding that that despite what traditional gender norms say, that look at these women who are doing these jobs and are doing it successfully and doing it on their own terms, right? Beyonce with her, I buy my own diamonds, I buy my own rings, that you're doing this and that you're also able to have the kind of life you want apart from any traditional marital status that had previously existed before. I also think too, if we're talking about popular media, we can also speak about social media's role, so that social media can be a really great way too of gaining insight, right? So lots of different TikTok clips talking about what is feminism, how does feminism work. I'm not suggesting that's perfect though, because there's also a lot of misinformation, but at least making people aware of what the movement looks like. Even more subtle things like if your boss says this, you can say that because this is not acceptable. So I think in that sense, making women aware of ways to combat sexism, ways that they can navigate this world more safely. And also, if they are inclined, if they don't like this treatment, making them aware that it exists and sort of telling them what they can do about it, whether, it's joining the Women's March, which was a great example of social media kind of bringing a whole country of women together to march for reproductive rights.
It's a great, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
All I was going to say is that I think, I mean, absolutely. And I was just very quickly going to tack on that. I think the challenge then is always taking sort of what you're describing, which I absolutely agree with, right? But which are like individuals understanding things about themselves or what they can do and making change for themselves. And then how you make that, those individual changes, broaden out to like systems, right? To change systems and communities, which is of course a lot more difficult. I mean, and ideally, eventually, the more individuals you have, right, who feel that way, the easier it is to change those systems. But I think that's always the challenge then.
Yeah, I think it could be a good educational tool, although of course education is only as good as the people who are doing the educating. So
going back to Marie-Joelle, you mentioned reproductive rights. What place does pop culture have in the conversation around reproductive rights?
Ooh, that one's a hard one. I think that pop culture does have a role in it, but I think in order to really get the message across, it has to be done in a subtle way. So in marketing, most of us receive marketing attempts every single day, and the second we know we're watching a commercial or an ad, we start counter-arguing, or we just completely dismiss it. So that pop culture has a way of presenting things to us. The Barbie movie is such a great example of presenting what is sexism to us in a way that is superficially really easy to understand, but at the same time carries this underlying message, so that when you're seeing this, you're like, what a terrible experience for the Kens. How can they do this to them? It's so unfair. And then you can almost feel the light bulb click where someone's like, oh, right. So I think that pop culture, especially things that superficially just seem like entertainment, can actually deliver some really important messages. And, they're obviously that movies that start off that way probably will not get the same kind of viewing as ones that kind of camouflage it in a cute story. That's unfortunate, but I also think that there is space for popular culture, popular media to kind of sneak in where people are not expecting it to the same degree, and therefore won't counter-argue as strongly.
Yeah, I think to dovetailing with that is this idea that, in some ways, this goes back to Marie-Joelle's, what you were saying about little girls, right? Like watching media and sort of understanding the kinds of things that they can achieve or be. And I think with reproductive rights, this is one of the real sort of advantages of popular culture and popular media, is that you know, in terms of legislation, you know, I don't know that we're necessarily seeing a direct impact right now. Um, but I do think that the sort of subjects that are sort of covered under the umbrella of reproductive rights, so abortion, birth control, right, sort of all of these things are being really like talked about quite openly in the media, right, in a whole variety of ways. And that means something, right? The fact that these questions and these conversations are ones that are being destigmatized, right? And I'm thinking both they're talked about on social media, they're talked about in news media, but even in like television programs, right, where characters sort of encounter situations where they, I don't know, have to go to the gynecologist, or they like Barbie, right, like Barbie at the end of the movie,
Yep.
or, you know, where they are confronted with an unplanned pregnancy and what do they do? And these debates are happening much more freely within popular sort of fictional media as well than they were, you know, 5-10 years ago. And I think just sort of destigmatizing those conversations is a sort of is a start in terms of thinking about how popular culture can impact our conversations about reproductive rights too. Yeah.
I also think that popular culture can provide a venue for highlighting problems. So when Serena Williams gave birth, her pain was ignored. She was treated terribly. She nearly died. Vogue did a huge cover piece on that to really spread awareness about, even if you are really a super athlete that everyone knows, you have fame, you have power, you have recognition, that she still was ignored when it came to talking about it. So I also think drawing attention to other women's plights and situations, highlighting that this is especially bad for Black women, was really, really important. I had something else to say. End of the semester brain. I'll leave it there. If I think of it, I'll come back to it.
And I know that Allison Felix is another example similar to Serena Williams, who with her first child had a very similar experience as Serena Williams. And she recently had her second child and had a very different experience from what she learned in the first experience. And sharing those experiences, I think, opens the conversation and continues the conversation and highlighting what's going on in the world today.
Oh,
Well,
I remember what I was going to say. I'm so sorry.
So go ahead. Go ahead.
Before I lose it, thank you. I was going to say that also social media can help women become aware of other women's plights. So, for example, how the abortion rules differ from states, and even help form grassroots foundations and making people aware of it, so that women who are in states who have access to the abortion pill are able to get it to women who are not in those states. And there's this this article that I read in the New Yorker not too long ago talking about I'm Jane's friend. Right, that would pair women with other women from the states, and the code word was I'm Jane's friend, and that would be the person you were meeting. You were meeting up really quickly, incidentally, in order to get these pills for the procedure that you needed. So that I think social media, also the Grassroots Foundation, can be really helpful.
And all I was going to say was also something sort of more broadly about destigmatization, along this idea of like understanding other women's plights, because I think many of the experiences that relate to reproductive rights more broadly can be really isolating, right? Because they're not necessarily experiences that everyone is at least not talking about, right? Even if they've going through it. So I was thinking about like Serena Williams, but I mean, so in terms of abortion, but also in terms of more sort of sorry, I lost my train of thought. Just like flew out of my head. Sort of negative experiences with healthcare, the healthcare system, women, particularly women of color, being sort of ignored by doctors, experiences with things like pregnancy loss, right? That people often tend to isolate themselves around because they feel like no one understands. And the more that these kinds of things are then reflected upon by popular media, and I think celebrities, this is one of the advantages of celebrities being willing to talk about these things. Gabrielle Union has talked quite a bit about her many sort of pregnancy losses and sort of the complexities of that she has 2 different memoirs, and then has also talked about it openly. And I think that those kinds of conversations can really sort of help make other women not feel isolated and feel like they can talk about these things too. So just.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. I'm going to shift gears a little. We've been talking about the Barbie movie. Obviously, Taylor Swift's Eras Tour and Beyonce's Renaissance Tour, they showcase a racially and body size diverse talent pool. What impact do you think this has on our understanding and acceptance of intersectional feminism?
Aviva, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think that I was just talking to someone about this recently because I'm really always fascinated by the ways scholarly terms end up in the popular sort of like popular language. So like intersectionality, which has been, I mean, as conceptually has been around for actually like 150 years or more, but as a term has been around for say like 35 years, right? So, and has been used in scholarship during that time. And then just in the last 5-10 years has really made it like out into popular culture, where if you talk about intersectionality now, a lot of people, if they have a sort of basic understanding of feminism, like my students all know what intersectionality is, right? Like they hear it, right? They hear it on TikTok, they hear it. I mean, I have a particular kind of like brand of student, I think, in my classes, but most of them know, right? They've heard the term, even if they don't quite understand it. And so I think that the more that we can see women who are, this sort of goes back to my very first answer, right? So women who are, one, sort of belong to a number of different sort of, like as we might call sort of like communities or identity positions, however they sort of want to identify themselves. And also, I think really essentially acknowledge the ways in which those relationships between identities inform their experience. So like Beyonce, right, talking about her experience as a Black woman. Or I was thinking her tour was very exciting to me, but maybe not quite as explosive as Beyonce and Taylor Swift, but like an artist like Janelle Monáe, who is queer and non-binary and Black, and they, you know, had this, like, their tour was amazing, and also like really is sort of really thinking through all of these ways in which all of these sort of identity positions intersect, and what it means to sort of own your own relationship to your body and to the world. And so I think that all of those aspects are real. I feel like I'm talking around the question. I'm not trying not to answer it, but I feel like all of those aspects are really, really important, right? To sort of see displayed, and for actually anyone, right? Girls, men, women, non-binary folks, boys, etc., like watching, either actually going to these shows or watching the movie, to recognize this sort of wide range of ways that you can inhabit your body, and that also that will affect your experiences in the world, right? Too, sometimes in positive and sometimes in negative ways. So
I just wanted to define intersectionality for anyone who's
oh yeah, sorry.
I was gonna ask.
No worries. Basically that, so feminism is about equality. And if you are really trying to lift everyone up, you have to recognize that we all exist at an intersection of different privileges and different levels of oppression. So for a long time, you know, Emma Watson, who was trying to advance feminism, was doing a great job, but she was only advancing the issues that concerned white women. So that it's important for white women to recognize that they may have privileges that their Black female counterparts don't, and even looking at it on different levels in terms of socioeconomic status, in terms of privilege, in terms of racial privilege, so that all of these layers are different layers of oppression. And if we're really talking about making all people equal, then we need to make sure we raise up all women in the ways that they need to be, recognizing that different people will need different kinds of help. I was going to say too that I think that this is wonderful. Typically in psychology, when we talk about having a standard for appearances, say, we'll talk about norms, what is normal or what has been established, right? And for a very, very long time, you know, I'm thinking about Sir Mix-a-Lot's Baby Got Back, who was a really big, important at the time. Did you know that the butt is now in the Smithsonian? I'm not even kidding. It's
really?
True.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yes. But right, that was one of the first big movements to kind of argue against different body sizes being beautiful. And so I think what that really does is when you have one norm for everyone, obviously the amount of people who are not going to be able to conform to that norm or fit into that definition of beauty is going to be really large. However, when we're seeing multiple different types of women feeling beautiful, acting powerful, liking the way they look, it really sort of shatters that norm. It takes away its power. So that people can recognize there's more than one way to be beautiful. I can be beautiful as a disabled woman. I can be beautiful as someone who has vitiligo, which is the condition that makes, that sort of has different colors of skin that kind of show up in patches, that what this really does is empower all women. And because if I think back to Naomi Wolf's book, and I'm sure this is old for a lot of people, but The Beauty Myth. So this was her, I believe it was her PhD thesis that was turned into a book. Yeah, I think so too. But it really was just talking about the additional burden that women had when it came to beauty, and that how that if you were, say, a lawyer, but you also had to think about fashion and your hair and having a manicure, things that, of course, that men did not. And so this additional burden of beauty took up a lot of women's time. And her thesis was essentially, what would we do if we had all that time back? Is beauty a burden that has been, kind of created by men in a patriarchy to keep women so busy that they're not able to accomplish as much? So I think by showing diversity and beauty in many different shades, you also help dispel the beauty myth.
You just made me think too, though, about, I mean, fully agree with this, right? But of course, with celebrity, this is a hard argument, because most celebrities do fit into sort of conventional standards of beauty. And even if they maybe aren't like fully sort of in these kind of normative forms of sort of what is beautiful, they are sort of made to fit, right, in other ways, right? And I was thinking about the sort of hilarious line in Barbie where Helen Mirren, like the narrator, says something. Margot Robbie is like, Barbie is melting down about how ugly she is, and the narrator sort of comes on to say, that the director should have cast someone different than Margot Robbie if they really wanted to make this point, right, about, and so, I mean, and, so in something like Barbie, it's sort of addressed directly, like, yes, we recognize, right, that like actually Margot Robbie is a very conventionally attractive person. And so this is not actually she's not actually a good candidate for making this argument about non-conventional beauty. But I mean, I think this is always the tension, right? To consider when celebrities are sort of enacting these roles, and as sort of role models too. So.
I agree with that. I agree that even though I feel like society is making little small steps, that for celebrities, you're right, that they're kind of made to fit. And Margot Robbie, who started off in Australian soap operas, has had a series of plastic surgeries in order to be the beautiful Barbie that we see. So that's not lost on a lot of people. Right, that
Yeah.
yes, she's really, really beautiful in a traditional way. But I do like the way some celebrities are kind of playing with those ideas. So I'm thinking of Doja Cat, for example, who recently shaved her head and is appearing in very avant-garde clothing. So like the outfit that she had where she was all decked in red with, I think they were sequins all over her head, right? Which was a really kind of a different view. Or even Janelle Monáe with the way she's presenting her fashion, right? I'm thinking of specifically the vagina pants, right?
Yes.
That they are a step outside the traditional way women are supposed to be. So I agree with you. It would be nice to see more at that level, but I'm heartened by the little changes we're seeing.
I mean, I think it is coming. Yeah.
When though, right?
Yes.
Good enough, but when?
There was a piece I can't remember, I think it was the New York Times, someone showed it to me about Kristen Stewart's fashion that was actually talking about how she's been playing a lot with these sort of pushing boundaries in terms of like fashion, right? So anyway.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you. That was a great discussion. Can we leverage this cultural moment to drive tangible progress by amplifying diverse voices, advocating for policy reforms, and promoting women's leadership across sectors? Another hard one, I think.
Complicated, yes. I mean, anytime you have more attention on a topic, it's going to, by nature, kind of have traction. At the same time, though, I would really hate to see this as being kind of something cute and trendy that doesn't last. So I think that a large part, although Beyonce, Taylor Swift, the Barbie movie have all kind of done their bit right now to centralize women's voices, it's not going to lead to change unless we continue that pattern. So I would say at this point, we need more wonderful women to step up and to show the world how diversely wonderful we are and the different types of power we can wield. Because although this is great momentum, you know, we don't want to see this trail off, and we don't want to see this having been a fad. So at least from my perspective, I think that yes, it can, but we have to keep riding that wave. And the only way we can keep doing that is with more women stepping forward.
It's such an
Yeah,
interesting
I
time, too. Oh, go
sorry,
ahead.
Abby.
I was just going to say it's an interesting time right today because Taylor Swift has a brand new album, Beyonce has a new album, so we're continuing to ride the wave of those two in particular. And to your point, who else can rise? And there's lots of opportunity. Sorry, Aviva.
Oh no, that's fine. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. I think that this is the moment where we can't sort of rest on our laurels and be like, oh look, like we have Barbie and we have Taylor Swift and we have Beyonce and all these people are sort of talking about feminism sort of openly, and that's great, right? Like this is actually the moment to push it further because it's really easy for these kinds of moments to backslide or to even fade. I mean, I think about this is related, but not exactly the same thing. But, you know, summer 2020, when we have all the sort of Black Lives Matter protests, and then we have, I mean, I'm thinking particularly from a media studies context, but this happened across the board, like film and TV production studios, like leaping to do more like DEI content and to make more programming that is sort of broadly sort of diverse in terms of race and gender, and then all of that falls away, right? So like a couple years and then that like kind of loses the spotlight and they just drop it because it's not trendy anymore, right? It's not the thing that everyone is doing. And you know, and then we end up seeing also like backlashes against diversity, equity, and inclusion happening in various places in higher ed and in other places. And so, you know, I think the sort of thinking about representations of women is tied to that too, because it can be really easy to think, oh, great, like this is the thing everyone wants to talk about. Let's talk about it more. But unless we're actually like people are stepping up, I think Marie-Joelle's point about like this is the point in time when people have to actually step up and say, no, I'm going to do something right about this. Like I'm going to you know, maybe consider running for office, right? Or I'm going to sort of try to take more of a leadership role in sort of my organization, or, you know, create some kind of grassroots community sort of organizing or whatever it is, right? Depending on sort of your interests and expertise. Like those are actually the things that then matter to continue to push the needle, right? The sort of popular culture can help create a kind of momentum, but it can't push everything, right? So, yeah.
And I'm just springboarding off of that, talking about the backlash. I think the backlash that Beyonce and Taylor Swift have received for treading on traditionally white men's spaces is ludicrous, but it's also very telling that for a lot of people, you know, that they are stepping outside of the bounds that they're supposed to be, that they need to get back to it. I remember seeing something about a coverage on, you know, her boyfriend, Travis Kelce.
Travis Kelce.
Thank you. I'm not a sports ball person, sorry. But that saying like, wonder why Taylor Swift is with Travis Kelce, because he made $70,000 for the Super Bowl. And meanwhile, everyone's just like, the man who posted that, everyone's just like, you know, she's a billionaire, right? But still that need to reframe the narrative in a way that's palatable. Or we can even think of, you know, the backlash that Beyonce has received for Cowboy Carter about how that's a traditionally white male domain, and that, you know, she couldn't possibly belong. And if you look at all the people who, like all the old stars, so Dolly Parton with Jolene coming out in support and saying, this is amazing, this is wonderful, all the people who are tangentially associated with having nothing but praise, and then the white men having big problems. This isn't country, that this doesn't work. And I would also encourage our viewers who are listening, if, Aviva made some really great ways that you can be more visible and help with the movement. But in psychology, we also talk about language and how language is important. And one of the things that women do all the time is use sorry as a verbal tick. So, and when you think about it, apologizing all the time, what are you actually apologizing for? You're apologizing for being there, for taking up space, for asking questions. You're apologizing for your right to exist. And, it's a very, very small thing. But I would encourage everyone to stop and see how often you use sorry and to see under what contexts. And, a classic example is, a man bumps into you and you say sorry, right? So that also too, making sure that when you speak, even on a small level, that you're accurately representing your power.
It's fantastic. I think what a great discussion. I'm super energized, and I think that we've been seeing what you've been talking about playing out in the media so frequently. And the sorry, I've heard that a few times, and I have found myself catching myself multiple times where I've done that and said, why am I doing this? I need to, it's kind of reprogramming. And so I think that that's a great small step to that reprogramming that everyone can take home with them. Going back to Barbie. So the Barbie movie begins with a version of a feminist utopia. What is your idea of a feminist utopia?
Do you mind if I jump in, Rachel? Okay. I mean, I think, as with all utopias, right? The Barbie feminist utopia is not really a utopia, right? So like, the concept of utopia is this idea of an idealistic place, but is actually it's actually impossible, right? So and usually utopias have some kind of, sometimes a very dark underbelly, and sometimes just something is sort of not right. And of course, the problem with the Barbie utopia is that the Kens have no place in it, right? So the Kens are actually and that's of course part of the point, right, of the film, is that everything is, and actually even the Barbies, right, it's all very superficial. And I think that's one of the things that, like, Margot Robbie's character, a stereotypical Barbie, like, starts to discover, is that she doesn't feel like it's a kind of a superficial, literally superficial, literally like plastic world that they live in, right? That's not sort of real and possible, and that, like, our human existence isn't like that. It's very complicated, and you're going to suffer. These things are just going to happen. And so to me, a feminist utopia is not one where everything is perfect, because I think that's actually not possible, but is one where a person's gender, right, and actually also race, sexuality, class, ability, etc., right, so all of these things, is not in any way a deciding factor in what they can do with their lives, right? And so, that doesn't mean that they will never struggle, right? Or like never have challenges, or sort of never have to confront anything that sort of pushes back against who they are, but that it's what is sort of controlling their ability to succeed, or their sort of ability to get an education or to get healthcare or whatever, right, is not being informed by any of these sort of like identity markers like gender or race or ethnicity, sexuality, etc. And that, that is the kind of like a real utopia that I would imagine, right? This kind of like it's almost like a humanist kind of like utopia, right? So yes.
I feel like a bobblehead because I'm just nodding. Yes, absolutely. Yes. So my answer, not surprisingly, was very much the same. I was going to say, as we talked about intersectionality earlier, right, that my version of a realistic potential utopia would be one in which all people had the same rights, the same accesses, and the same opportunities. That whoever wanted to wear pink could wear pink, whoever wanted to wear makeup could wear makeup, whoever wanted to be president could be president, and that these were not qualified by different identity markers, right, the way they currently are now. So that basically intersectionality would no longer need to exist, because everyone would be at the same level in terms of privileges and abilities and opportunities.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Aviva and Marie-Joelle. We're going to open the floor for questions. So please submit questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We have one. So our first question is, What would you say is one of the best ways for men to actively support and participate in feminism and womanism without trampling or bulldozing?
Oh, I'll take this one
Yeah.
first. So I think that one of the things that we talk about a lot is when we're talking about someone of the privileged class. So if I complain, that's sexist, it doesn't carry the same weight as if a man steps in and says, dude, that's sexist. Why are you doing that? So I think a really, really great way for men to be allies is because they're in this privileged position where other people of their in-group, right, other men are going to listen to them, to start calling out the sexism when they see it, or start calling out, racism, or start highlighting, being like, that wasn't funny. Why would you say that? Or anytime a man is judging a woman in terms of her appearance or calling her a bitch, that they have an opportunity to speak up and say, actually, would you say that if she was a man? Right? You wouldn't say that she was a bitch. So that I think men have a really wonderful privileged place and a really powerful way that they can help with, all the isms that we're suffering.
Yeah, and to piggyback off absolutely. And to piggyback off of that, I would say also amplifying then women's voices in spaces where they're not being heard, because I think, which is not the same as sort of trying to take their idea and then run with it yourself, but rather saying like, Sarah made this really great point. Can we go back to talking about what Sarah was saying, right? So like because this happens all the time, right? In corporate environments and higher ed and all sorts of environments, right? Where women might give an idea out, like in a meeting situation, right? And then it either gets ignored or someone just takes it up as if it was their idea instead, right? And actually this is a place that is really helpful for someone else, particularly if you're a man, is particularly if it's a male dominated sort of situation, to say, no, wait, like that was, Sarah, Mary's, whatever, right? Idea that she just said 5 minutes ago, right? Like, let's hear more what she has to say. And that can actually really help too, to shift the conversation.
Absolutely.
As a female in engineering, I feel that very frequently.
Sure you do. I'm sure you have plenty of stories.
Yes. All right. The next question. What about the negative impact Taylor Swift has on feminism? She represents a hyper-sterilized form of femininity, I can speak today, that is harmful via her art and fandom to women-aligned people who don't fit in that role, including our trans community.
I guess I would want to know a little bit more about the harm, because my husband is trans. I know lots of trans folks and they love Taylor Swift, right? I think that she has a performance of a type of femininity, but I don't believe she's putting down anyone else's. Full disclosure, I'm not a Swiftie, so I could be speaking out of turn. If I am, I apologize. But it's my understanding that she is not actively putting down other women. She's just kind of living her life as she sees fit. I agree that she could perhaps use her position of power to amplify other people's voices that don't fall into the same sort of cookie cutter stereotype of what a woman looks like or how a woman should be. But as I recall, she's actually been pretty active with the LGBTQ community as well, so that she is in part using her platform for that. I think, we can't blame her for being herself and living her life on her terms, but it would be really nice if she could use that position more to help elevate others' voices.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll just very quickly add, I'm not a huge like Taylor Swift fan, actually. I mean, she's fine. I don't have a problem with Taylor Swift, but I don't know a lot about her specifically. But actually, in a broader point, I actually think this is the argument for more visibility of more types of women, right? So, I mean, I could certainly see, Taylor Swift, just not necessarily her actions, right, or her words, but just her presence, right? She is a like conventionally attractive, young, sometimes blonde, right, like woman, and and she's white, and right, like, so she sort of fits like all of these, in some ways, these sort of norms of feminine attractiveness, even if maybe she's not always embodying them in exactly the ways like that are directed towards sort of like objectification, right, or men in the ways that stereotypically female celebrities have. But I think this is actually my big soapbox that I'm always on, is about tokenism, right? And so that, and think the more representation you have, so not just one person, right, but like 20 or 100, right, who can show these sort of like different ways to inhabit sort of womanhood, for example, right? That's what we sort of like need to keep sort of positioning, right? And maybe that helps then. So yes, some people may not like Taylor Swift, right? And that's fine. You don't have to like Taylor Swift, right? Or feel like she's a good role model, but there are other people who can be then.
Mhm.
And I think even if you don't like Taylor Swift, you have to respect that she's self-made, right?
Mhm.
She writes her own music. She started at a young age. She built an empire for herself. So even if, again, as a non-Swiftie, I'm not familiar with her work, but I applaud that aspect. I applaud her for her hard work and making her career happen.
Mhm.
I feel the same way. I'm also not a Swiftie, but I very much respect that she's a recent addition to the Forbes billionaire list, and that's all her doing. And I think that's really incredible in today's world for a female to be in that position in culture, in our popular culture. So our next question is, I find so often that women publicly tear down other women. How do we counterbalance that or call that out in a positive, friendly manner to women in our lives?
I always think when someone, from a psychological perspective, when you're tearing someone down, it's because you feel threatened by them, right? So that you feel threatened by success. And we've seen a lot of kind of behaviors that have been encouraged in women. So the idea that, when it comes to competition for men, for example, that there can be only one winner. I'm looking at you, The Bachelor, right? You're not helping with that. But, that this idea that being dominating in terms of looks or attractiveness is kind of the fight we all have to fight. And I think coming back to something we were talking about earlier, when you see and appreciate multiple types of beauty, you understand I can be beautiful in my way, or I can be successful in my way, and the other person can be too. There's room for all of us to exist on our own levels. And then when you feel secure in yourself, you don't feel the need to pull other people down in order to make yourself feel better. So in a very, very short pop psych way, that ultimately, if we all feel more confident and comfortable being who we are, we won't see other people's success as a challenge or a threat.
Yeah, and I think that just to add to the part of question of like how you can say this to people, right, in your life, I think, I think it goes back to that, what I was just saying a minute ago about like, you can not like something, like that's fine, right? Like people don't have to like Taylor Swift or whomever. But there's a difference between not liking something and then trying to tear them down. And I think one of the ways, particularly, and this maybe only works if it's about a celebrity, but I think one of the ways in which I have addressed this in the past, although mostly for me, it's when students start railing about like a particular film we've watched that they don't like. And I'm like, you cannot like it. It's totally fine with me. But you can't actually say, oh, this is a stupid movie and shouldn't have been made, because there are lots of people who do like it. And so what you're saying is that your opinion is more important than like 100 million people who actually did enjoy this, right? Or whatever, right? I mean, however you want to frame that. And so I think it's, matters of taste, right, are fine, but that doesn't mean that your taste then, like what you're saying is actually that my taste actually is the only taste that matters, which I think we all, even if we don't want to admit it, know isn't true, right? So I don't know if that's actually useful either, but go ahead.
I feel a similar way when I'm presenting research on sexism, for example, in my class, and someone objects and says, I don't believe this research. And I'm saying, okay, like much like you, I'm like, okay, you're allowed to object. You're allowed to think that this isn't valid, but importantly, why, right? Why? A problem with the participant recruitment? Do you have a problem with the methodology, the manipulations? Do you have a problem with the analysis or how they drew their conclusions? Right? You can't just be like, I don't like it, because that's not an intelligent answer, right? That's not substantial. So very much like that, I also am like, great, you can completely disagree, but I want to hear what your logical, rational criticisms are, not just your feelings about it.
Yeah.
All right. Next question from our audience. How do pop culture figures, particularly male figures who challenge gender norms like Harry Styles and Prince, fit into this conversation? Does this impact our view on gender?
I think it can. I think, again, going back to you can't be what you can't see, seeing people gender bending in terms of their fashion and not just feeling good about it, but being proud of it and having other people, also enjoy. Bad Bunny is another example, right? Of someone who wears skirts, also sometimes Crocs, but that illustrates that, even being like a tough Latino with machismo, that you can be this, you can have this kind of fluidity. So I think they're another example of being diverse, showing people that it's okay to wear a skirt. They're actually really comfortable, right? And nice on a really hot day. So that highlighting that that you can be more than, again, the one very narrow norm of this is how men should dress, this is the colors that men should wear, right? That you have freedom and creativity.
Yeah, I mean, in this, this is one of the reasons why men should support feminism, right? So not just, I mean, I would hope also for women, right? Like for women and girls, right? But also, I mean, standards of masculinity can be really problematic and really damaging too. And so the more that we can see in celebrities or as sort of pop culture, men's roles also being sort of challenged and shifted, actually the better it's going to be for men and boys too. Who's like, boys who say maybe don't fit like all the kind of masculine sort of ideals and stereotypes and then get bullied at school, right? And these or men who just feel like they can't sort of meet all of those sort of normative standards either, and then feel like they're, say, passed over for positions, right? Or feel that they can't sort of meet the standards of the sort of company that they're working in or whatever, right? Like all of these things are being informed by these like patriarchal sexist categories that are also impacting men and boys too, right? So yeah.
In my psych of gender class, I often say to students, like, if I was to tell you, you can't wear that, or you can't date that person, or you can't pursue this job, you'd probably say the not so polite version of screw you, Professor Estrada. But that's what gender norms are. They're telling you and they're limiting you, that we're all people. And as people, we have a right to dress, express, behave, date whomever we want. So yes, I think too that it's just really great to see not just this happening at the level of celebrity, but I think too of some of the media that I watched more recently, for someone, they had the first male prom queen, right? And men are now wearing dresses, to prom. So even seeing that kind of change on a small level is really great.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we have time for one last question, and I think this has been a fantastic discussion, so thank you again both. Our last question, what is one takeaway you hope our attendees leave with today?
That's a good question. I mean, I think for me, I would say, I think the conversation about intersectionality is so important, that we are sort of recognizing that each of us is interacting in the world with a set of privileges or potentially disadvantages that are not coming from ourselves, right? But that are socially constructed ones. And that they are based in things like gender and race and class and ability, and body size and all sorts of things. And that those sort of in twofold ways, both do not define you as a person, like in terms of who you are sort of inside, like in a touchy-feely kind of way, right? But also that they do inform your life, and that it's important to actually recognize where those privileges lie, and maybe where you can actually step up into those privileges and use that power. And then also the ways in which you might be impacted by them, in more sort of challenging ways, in ways that it's helpful to recognize so that you know what you're sort of grappling with. So that for me would be, I think, one of the main things.
For me, I completely agree with that. I would also say stop apologizing. Stop apologizing, stop undermining your power by saying, I know it's probably a stupid idea, or I'm really sorry to bother you with this idea because I'm sure it's dumb, but that all of those things, you're highlighting how you don't even believe what you're saying. Why should this other person? And I completely agree with Aviva's perspective that, talking about intersectionality, we all have privilege that we can use, right? So as a white passing woman, I can amplify other minoritized women's voices, right? I can call out sexism, I can call out racism when I'm seeing it being directed at them. So it doesn't just have to be for men who are wanting to support the movement, but other women too, recognizing when you have privilege and being able to help other people who are not part of that privileged category survive certain situations, right? So to be more equal. And so that is something all of us can do every day.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Aviva and Marie-Joelle, for sharing your knowledge with us today. This has been such a robust conversation, and I appreciate you taking your time to share your knowledge and to have a really great discussion. And thank you all for joining us today. Please keep in touch with the Women's Network, and you can join us at our upcoming events. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you again.